safety as his family stays with him because they still don't have power. And it's dropping to dangerously cold temperatures tonight, or at least in terms of not having any heat. So, yeah, he couldn't join us, but we wish him the best, and we hope that the rest of his extended family gets power very soon, as well as all the other listeners and friends and family listeners we may have who don't have power at the moment. We hope that gets fixed very soon, because it sucks. I was without power myself for several days, and it's nice to be back to podcasting.
Living in Texas, being used to hearing stories or dealing with it firsthand, it's tough, man, hearing about all that stuff going on the East Coast, and people lining up for miles with gas, or people just saying, look, I'm not even going anywhere because they have no gas, no power. It's crazy. I hope that situation improves dramatically here in the next few days.
Yeah, we have gas rationing right now. Today it was only cars with even number ending license plates. Tomorrow will be only with odd. I guess it was odd number today, even number tomorrow. If you have a vanity plate, that counts as odd, etc. So yeah,
indeed it does.
Look at the bright side. You're doing better than T-Dog and Lori.
Yeah, that is true. But before we talk about T-Dog and Lori and the rest of the cast, who wants to tell us about our sponsor?
I will do so. Our sponsor for this episode of the Walking Dead TV podcast is Discount Comic Book Service. That's dcbservice.com. You can find all of your comics, graphic novels, toys, trinkets, Walking Dead related items at ridiculously low prices over at dcbservice.com. Some highlights for this month, as with every month recently, you can earn an extra 5% off your Comixology orders if you use the DCBS portal to order your comics on Comixology. So you can go to dcbservice.com and follow the link there. And so if you're not into the whole print thing, you can earn yourself 5% off of future print orders. If not for yourself, maybe holidays are coming up, gifts for folks. They also have a sister site, InStockTrades.com, and you can order comics and graphic novels. Again, really deep discounted prices there, free shipping on anything over $50. Great deals all around. The Marvel Now bundles are sale continues, and you can get, if you order the whole bundle, it's 50% off the bundle. All new Marvel and DC trades and hardcovers that you pre-order this month, the November orders are out, are 50% off. So that's an incredible deal for all those cool hardcovers and trades over at DCB Service. Even though it's the beginning of November, if you still want to put your October order in, just shoot them an email and send it over. They'd be more than happy to take your late order. Being that most of the stuff doesn't hit final order cutoff yet, there's still time to get it in. But the November orders are out, and a couple Walking Dead related items. This month we have Walking Dead number 106, 40% off on that single issue. Don't pay $2.99, you can get it for $179. And then there's just a bunch of Walking Dead t-shirt related stuff. It's kind of a little bit of a gap between trades and hardcovers right now. I think we talked about some of those last month, but still you can get the regular monthly issue as well as a bunch of trinkets going on over there. And if you use the code WD8, you can save an extra 8% off your order through dcbservice.com. We thank them for their support of the Walking Dead TV podcast.
So before we talk about the actual episode, last week we weren't able to talk about ratings. I don't think they were in yet, and we don't have ratings for this week's episode yet. Let me just give you an overview of the season so far. The season premiere for season 3 was a 5.8. That means out of all the televisions in the United States of America that were turned on at the time The Walking Dead was on, 5.8% were watching The Walking Dead, and that is 10.87 million viewers. Episode 2 of the season was a 5.1, so a slight dip, and that was 9.55 million viewers. And then last week's episode 3, jumped back up. That was a 5.4 with 10.51 million viewers. So now that we got this back, we jumped up a little bit, and I don't know this for sure, but if the first episode of the season was a 10.87 million viewers, and that was a record, I have a feeling that last week's episode would have broken the same record it broke. Had it not already been broken. So that's pretty awesome for him.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. I think this episode is going to be highly talked about. I think maybe people that are lapsed and on the fence might come back to it. So I'd be curious to see what episode 5 does in the ratings. And I wish there was a way to measure like repeated viewings, or even typically I think AMC replays the previous week's episode the following week. And I wouldn't be surprised even if they didn't, if they made a special case to do that for this previous episode, given what happens and given all the buzz about it. So I'm curious to see. I think overall those numbers are probably a little on the low side, given like I said, people jumping on it after the fact. So I'm really curious about next week's numbers to see if how this week's show might have impacted that.
I think you might have hit the nail on the head there, Russ, too, when you say there are a lot of people who lapsed on the show in the second season where the ratings had a slight dip, comparatively, that are coming back to it now. I know even anecdotally I have a few people who have jumped back on in the third season just because of the word of mouth and the buzz that's been generated about how good it's been since the season premiere.
Absolutely. Okay, so before we talk about this week's episode, we have a few emails and voicemails about last week's episode. So, Russ, why don't you place that first voicemail?
Alrighty, we'll do that. This first voicemail is from Brad or Brian from Illinois, and it sounds like he's sticking up for Brad. So let's see what he has to say.
Hey guys, Brian from Illinois. I just wanted to leave a message about the whole thing last week with everybody coming down on Brad pretty hard about the fights, and then that whole thing. Let's give Brad a break. He got us to think about it, which I thought was really cool, because I sat back and I started to think, who got bit, and started thinking about the impression. So he made us think about it. So it's not like everybody would come down on him. I'm surprised Morgan himself didn't call in and be like, hey, did you listen to me in the first season? So, but Brad, I give it up to you, man. You got us all to think about it. So yeah, I think we got it cleared up, and I think you guys figured it out on the last show. But all right, guys, have a great day. Bye.
I thought Brian was talking about Ken Morgan for a second. I was very confused, but now it all makes sense. Thank you for the voicemail, Brian. I'm sure Brad appreciates it.
Absolutely. We all love Brad, even though he goes off on tangents. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we love him so much. So, even though he's a Primus tonight, we're not.
Jim, why don't you read us one of our emails?
Great. We got an email from Paul. It said, hey guys, discovered your podcast last year midway through season 2, and I've been listening ever since. I love the episode breakdowns you guys provide. And after listening to episode 74, Paul had some really cool continuity ties. Unfortunately, I can't go into details of his email because it was kind of full of spoilers for the Rise of the Governor novel. But Paul, I really get what you're saying there, and you really raised some interesting points and connected some dots there between the Rise of the Governor novel and the Governor that we're seeing on the television show. So kudos to you, sir, and he says to enjoy the podcast and keep it up. So thank you for that, Paul. We appreciate it.
What's our next voicemail?
Next one is from Meg in Poughkeepsie. This one's a little bit longer, so here we go.
Where is Poughkeepsie?
Is it in New York or New Jersey?
No, it's definitely New York.
New York.
Okay. I know the name. I just couldn't think of where it was. There's a Piscataway, New Jersey. I don't think that's what you're thinking of, though.
Yeah, Poughkeepsie is in New York. Sorry, here we go. Let's see what Meg has to say.
Hi guys, it's Meg from Poughkeepsie calling. I really love your show. I found it last season because I caught the zombie fever and I kind of was searching around on iTunes and found your podcast. So thank you for making it. My son and I, he's 14, we were both super disappointed actually with the first episode of season 3. And from listening to your podcast, it sounds like we were the only two in the world who really basically thought it was not good. Here's what I didn't like. I didn't like Lori's, holding her belly the whole time, her pregnant belly in quotes. I think the acting has been really lousy. The whole Carl investing really creeped me out. My son pointed out that there were no gun kickbacks. That you guys didn't mention that, but and that the sleeping walker in the hallway that bit Herschel. I just think, do walkers actually sleep? I mean really. So, but so fortunately, I listened to your show after the dismal first episode. I listened to your show, everyone loved the first episode. And I talked my son into watching it, and we both realized, okay, what's happening is it's even more like a comic book. So I really appreciate the good review that you all gave, and it made me and my son say, let's give it another listen, another viewing, I mean. And I just also want to say I wouldn't have even read the comic book if it weren't for your show. So both my son and I love The Walking Dead TV and comics, so it's fantastic that you connected us up with that. So just one more thing about your show. I like how you all are super knowledgeable, and you keep the discussion on course, mostly about the TV show, which is great, and once in a while about the comics. But I think that you guys really do a great job, and you keep the language clean, so even my 12-year-old and 14-year-old can listen, and I appreciate it. So see you in Twitter and on the podcast. Thanks a lot.
Oh, well, thank you. We appreciate that.
Some kind words from Meg. Thank you so much.
Meg brought up a couple points I wanted to touch on. One, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. If I understood correctly, she was saying we liked episode 301 more because it was more like the comic. I can't speak for everyone. I don't know if I'd say for me that was necessarily true, but I can see where other people would probably agree with that quite a bit. What did you guys think about that? Do you like the show more when it's more like the comic?
I like it more when it deviates from the comic, honestly. I think what she meant is the suspension of disbelief parts of it were kind of more like the comic. That's how I took her comment. That,
okay,
you know,
that I can understand.
Yeah, the quote-unquote sleeping walker, and, you know, just the no recoil on the weapons, and everybody, you know, we even talked about that, I think, last week or the week before, about how everybody gets a headshot. You know, nobody seems to miss.
Right. They have the best shots in the world.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a little of that is just suspension of disbelief. I mean, it's not just in the comics either. I mean, we see that with all kinds of TV shows out there where, you know, crazy stuff happens. I mean, you know, for those of us that grew up with MacGyver in the 80s or the A-Team, it doesn't get much crazier than that as far as what people can do with a paperclip and a rubber band. So, I definitely get what she's getting at there. But, you know, again, I really appreciate the kind words, and I love that we've converted another one, boys. We converted another one.
Well, I think too sometimes and I always try to be very careful of this. I mean, since we have read the comic, we see things like the prison, or we see Michonne, or we see the governor introduced into the television show, and because we know the storyline of the comic, we're enthusiastic and excited. I think more so than someone would be who are coming to those things cold, without having read the comic, without having that, that kind of knowledge beforehand.
That's probably absolutely true.
So something I always try to keep in mind, while we're doing the podcast is, there are a lot of people watching the show that haven't read the comic and don't understand why we're so excited. We see Michonne, at the end of season 2, or we get introduced to the governor in Woodbury now in season 3. So I mean, I can understand where she, we might be, the enthusiasm I think might have carried over into episode 1, more than her and her son thought so. Anyways,
that's definitely possible. I gotta say, in terms of comic versus TV, I like Russ said, I like when the TV show deviates in terms of plot, in terms of what happens on a individual, more intimate scale. I do definitely appreciate though when it's evoking the tone of the comic, and certainly, I mean, like we've been saying here for the last couple minutes, when those elements from the comic book, Michonne, the governor, the prison, when those things show up, definitely I get excited. I wouldn't say that I want things to play out exactly the way they did in the book, and certainly the episode we're going to talk about tonight, they really did not. But I do definitely like when the tone or individual things are brought in. Another thing she brought up was a kickback. We mentioned that briefly. Yeah, I think at this point, no, we didn't mention it, but we've mentioned it a lot of times in the past. Maybe not on the air as many times as we've done off the air, but at a certain point, I've kind of just given up on pointing it out. It is what it is. And for the sleeping zombie in the hallway, in comic book terms, and I think they even refer to it in the show briefly like this, or maybe I'm just imagining it, but they're generally referred to as lurkers, and those are zombies that you think have already been dispatched. They're just kind of sitting around, and whether it's damage to the zombie or whether it's emaciation of the zombie, for whatever reason, they don't react until you're really close, and then they kind of lunge for you. So I mean, I like them in terms of they're good, they're creepy, they're good for a jump scare, which is kind of cheap, but they're still good for them. But again, it is another one of those suspension of disbelief things for sure.
They're a great argument for the double tap.
Yes, amen.
Yes. Lastly, one of the things I want to comment on is the family friendliness to the show. I mean, we kind of pride ourselves on the network in general. I mean, anything on what we call the master feed, which is Half Hour Wasted, Legion of Dudes, Out Now with Aaron and Abe, our Before Watchmen specials, which are technically Legion of Dudes, and the Walking Dead TV podcast. We definitely keep the language family friendly. If there are occasions where there's cursing, it's always bleeped out or otherwise edited. Yeah, or otherwise edited. So again, if that's the kind of entertainment that you like, a little self-indulgent plug here, head over to hhwld.com and check out some of the other shows that we got going on. Because if you like the banter, most of us are cross-pollinate a lot, and you'll hear a lot of the same voices going on. So thanks again.
Yes, thank you very much, Jim. What's that last email?
I've got an email here from Todd W. It brings up an interesting question. Todd W. I was surprised you didn't touch on Merle's comment when he ranted about having a gun pointed at them. He went on to say that he would be more scared of a man who walked up to him with his hands in his pockets. Is this foreshadowing of the governor walking up to the National Guard group? And is Merle scared of the governor? Food for thought, Todd W.
Well, I think we'll definitely have more to say about whether he's scared of the governor as we talk about this week's episode. But the foreshadowing is definitely an interesting idea. I really like that. But in terms of just general good life advice for after the world has ended, yeah, I mean, what he's saying is kind of the devil you know versus the devil you don't kind of idea. If you see a person has a gun, you can at least be prepared for it and know that they are not trying to hide that gun from you. If they have their hands in their pockets, it could be anything. Who knows? They could have a live grenade for all you know, or a snake, or a Pez dispenser, which are very dangerous.
A snake-shaped Pez dispenser
that shoots bullets.
And snakes.
Snake bullets. But definitely good catch about the foreshadowing. I obviously we can't say for sure whether it is, but I certainly would like to believe so. All right, without any further ado, should we talk about this week's episode?
Sure.
Alrighty. Episode 304 of The Walking Dead is titled Killer Within. We begin the episode outside the prison, where we see a person walking around who has a fire axe. We can't see exactly who the person is, although I was able to guess fairly quickly who it was, or at least who I assumed it was, and I was correct. I don't know, what about you guys? Did you guess as to who it would be?
I did not expect it to be who it was, just based on the fact that we saw how that person was dispatched at the end of I guess the second episode. So I was it surprised me.
I was immediately thinking about the end of the last episode where somebody was watching Carol practice her cesarean cutting skills on that young girl zombie. Remember, we saw someone watching her from afar,
right?
That she didn't notice, and I thought, immediately I thought, okay, same person, same lurker.
I got you. And Gail Ann Hurd, one of the producers, she was on Talking Dead, and she pretty much confirmed that it was the same person here who was watching Carol and who did what we're about to talk about here. But we're watching this person. He's walking around, and he's got a deer carcass that's pretty messed up, and he's pretty much leaving a trail of deer crumbs, if you will, from outside the prison gates. Inside, he's chopping gates open, he's breaking locks, he's leaving a trail of blood and gore straight from outside the prison while he's inside to lead zombies in. And I think after that it goes right to the credits, right? Or was there anything more?
No, it was just him doing those preparations with the gas can, the deer, and then opening the gate and putting more meat to lure in the walkers.
Right. So when we come back from the opening credits, we've got Rick and the group. They're discussing their plan to clear out the prison yard and shore up everything there. And Axel and Oscar come out and immediately set the group on edge. But they just say they want to join the group. They want to turn over a new leaf. They can't stay in that cell anymore in that prison block. Those are the guys they know. They can't even get them outside too easily because there's still walkers in their area of the courtyard. And so the group
Criminals are a superstitious and cowardly lot.
and so the group kind of discusses it. Rick says no. Daryl says no. But T-Dog is in favor of giving him a chance at least. Rick says, do you want to choose their safety or our safety, or do you want to let them die? Or do you want to let us die? And he basically says, I don't want to let either of them die. We should give them a chance. But Rick disagrees.
At this point, I was like, when was the last time we heard somebody giving a dissenting opinion trying to use logic to persuade the group into a humanitarian action? Oh, yeah, that was Dale.
Minutes before he died.
Yeah, so at this point, I was like, well, T-Dog, it's been nice knowing you.
And see, I probably should have guessed that. Instead, I went to, finally, they're going to give T-Dog a bit of a story arc. Nope. Well, a very short one that was only for this particular story, but I was hoping for better things for him. It was not to be. So we jump over to Woodbury, where Michonne is looking at the National Guard trucks. She's doing her best Batman. She's finding the blood traces. She's finding bullet holes in the side of it. She's inspecting the machine gun mounted on the back. And then she does some detective work with the governor, and she asks him about how the soldiers died. And he tries his best to play coy and to convince her to stay in Woodbury. I could use you in my army. And Michonne's clearly not buying it. Later on, she and Andrea have a discussion where they decide, or more Michonne decides and is trying to convince Andrea, we should leave, we should go for the coast, find an island if we can. And she makes it very clear she does not trust the governor.
I think the governor sees the potential in Michonne to be like another Merle, like another enforcer, if he was able to get her onto his side, but obviously not to be.
Right. And it's interesting, we've already kind of seen how the governor prefers loners. He prefers not to find a group. He wants one person, maybe two people if he has to, but he doesn't want groups that might turn against him. He wants the Merles, he wants the Miltons, he wants people with no other ties to other people outside of the community. And it's interesting he's playing both sides against the middle. He's both trying to convince Andrew to stay and Michonne to stay, but I wonder if they both decided, yeah, this is cool, whether he would actually let both of them live or whether he would dispatch one of them pretty quickly, and who would he choose?
I think he wants one for one thing and one for another, though, if you know what I mean.
That is
Michonne would be like a nice, another, and forgive the Merle pun, another right hand for him in combat situations. But evidently, we see from that the later scene in this episode, he definitely has designs on Andrea. Right. Romantic designs, as it were.
So at least in my opinion, if he had to choose between the two of them, which one he would let stay, I think he would choose Michonne because he can get what he wants from Andrea from someone else. Whereas a killer as skilled as Michonne, they're not just growing on trees.
I agree. I mean, we saw he had a woman in his bed at the end of last episode, so
right.
Obviously.
But the woman in the picture at the end of that episode was blonde, and the woman in his bed was brunette. I think that woman in the picture, his wife or whatever, I think Andrew reminds him of her.
Probably a good point.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's interesting. I like that thought. We head back to the prison where, and I guess we forgot one thing from the earlier scene. I forgot one thing from the earlier scene. They're trying to find Maggie and Glenn, and Maggie and Glenn are getting it on up in one of the guard towers in one of the few funny scenes of the episode.
Yeah, that was pretty comical.
Yeah. But so later on, Rick is telling Glenn to give Axel and Oscar a week's worth of supplies and then get them out of here. They don't want to stay in that cell block. Fine, they can leave and they can go do whatever they want, but they can't do it here. So Axel is talking to Daryl and he's like, hey, I can fix your motorcycle. It sounds like it has some problems here. Wants nothing to do with it. And Oscar is still being his. How would you even describe that? He has no interest in playing up the friend angle. He is not going to bring himself down to the level of Axel and of the group of trying to play nice to get in with the group.
He knows that there's no point to it. Like, you could be nice all you want. These people aren't going to change their mind. They're not going to come around. So, why are you degrading yourself and demeaning yourself? Basically, man up and just come to grips with the fact that they don't want you. They don't want me. We're on our own. This is just how it is.
Right.
I would say standoffish.
Good word. Not the one I was thinking of. I still can't figure out what it was, but still good.
Aloof?
No, we can keep naming words.
Nonplussed.
Jim Deach, stop naming words.
Unimpressed? Underwhelmed.
What pistachio nut? Red pistachio nut. Meanwhile, Beth, Carl, and Lori are helping Herschel up onto some crutches that they found, and they take him for a walk out of the cell block where Carl challenges Herschel to a race, which I thought was pretty funny.
Was it me, or did you think Herschel was doing his best Scarecrow impression on those from the Wizard of Oz impression on the or Tin Man impression on the crutches? It just seemed like, I don't know, maybe he's just still jacked up on pain meds or something. But most people take the crutches fairly easy. It just seemed like they were belaboring the fact that he has a really hard time getting around on crutches, which I don't know, it just seemed odd to me.
His whole balance would be off, though. I mean, he's missing a whole legs. I mean, you break your leg, sure, but your balance is still there because you still have both legs. His whole balance, his whole equilibrium is thrown off.
And I thought he was doing fairly fine. It was more that Beth and Lori were coddling him and treating him like he was going to spontaneously combust if they didn't stay within 3 inches of him.
Yeah.
So you have this moment in the episode where I'm sitting there, and one of my sisters is in the room as well, and we're watching the episode, and you have this nice quiet moment. So I think soft music was playing, everybody's smiling, the camera's taking these slow pans throughout the group, and I just looked over and said, okay, something very, very bad is about to happen because they're telegraphing just how bad this is going to be so much. And not surprisingly, the camera pans just a little bit more, and you see a group of walkers in the courtyard behind Herschel, Lori, and Carl, and everything goes to hell very quickly.
The one thing I want to say at this point, we've been pretty, or at least I have, and this comment will kind of sound somewhat hypocritical, but I think I can justify it to myself. I've been pretty critical of them doing divergent story points and that they take episodes and focus on one group or the other. We kind of praised last week with last week's episode about them focusing on Woodbury and not trying to go back and forth. But I will say this episode works better, in my opinion, because they went back and forth. And the reason I think that is because of the tension. Like, you can't sit there the whole time and be on the edge of your seat, but you get to that moment where the main group is being chased and stuff is happening, and then boom, they cut away to Woodbury. And it's like, okay, you can breathe for a few seconds and then wonder what's going on there, and then boom, they're back in the prison and stuff is going on. So I thought this was a very good balance. And the other thing is it kind of balanced the action and slower points. To me, if you have either slowness going on one side and slowness going on the other side, I think that's when it suffers and drags a little bit, or the other way around. If it's action in both sides, then it's like too much going on at once. So I thought it was really cool that they balanced this high drama, high action, high tension, situation in prison with kind of the conniving, scheming, who's moving and positioning who in Woodbury, to counteract that. I thought that was just very, very well done.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It helps keep us from developing ulcers. So the zombies attack. Herschel and Beth get themselves inside a little chain link fenced in, I don't even know what you call it, but a little section that kind of surrounds a door. So they get themselves locked in the middle of the action, but at least far enough away from the zombies that they are safe for the time being. Maggie, Lori, and Carl, they flee into the cell block, and as T-Dog is fighting off zombies, he gets bitten right on the shoulder, and that is our first indication that things are about to go very badly.
Where was his riot shield?
Yeah.
My wife looked at me and said, "Oh no," and I said, "I know, just like Big Tiny, they can't cut off his shoulder."
Pretty much. So we head back to Woodbury, and that's where Andrea is talking to Merle, and she shows him on a map where Herschel's farm was, because he wants to go look for Daryl, and he asks her to come along with him. She says no, and he also hits on her a little bit, and she makes it pretty darn clear that she's not interested in him. She'll deal with Shane, but not Merle, even she has standards. And they have a discussion about how they were both abandoned, and we see, I mean, I guess there's already hints of this a little bit, but Andrea's a little bit ticked at the group for abandoning her.
Yeah, I couldn't really tell what her real feelings were on it, because she didn't seem like really upset, but she didn't seem overly forgiving either. I mean, it was kind of like she knew it kind of all went to hell and everybody went their own way, but I think she was, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see when the inevitable reunion hits how that's going to play itself out.
Definitely. And this was a good scene for Merle. We have this moment where she asks him, is the governor a good man? And Merle says, he's a good man. When he found me, I was not in good shape. He didn't have the hand. He should have just kept on going or should have killed me. But he brought me along with him, and he's a good man. Which is then juxtaposed when Merle goes to the governor, who is playing golf, by doing drives off the side of the wall surrounding Woodbury, and he says, "Hey, Andrea gave me this information. I want to go find my brother." And the governor, I don't know, passive aggressively is the right term, but he very quickly and very strongly tries to dissuade Merle from going. He doesn't want to take other people. He doesn't want Merle to go by himself. He says, basically, you get me more information, I'll go with you myself. But you can tell that even if he gets that more information, he's going to try to find another reason not to let Merle go off and not to go off with Merle to look for Daryl.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, that whole exchange, because it was the governor. It definitely accentuated the fact that the governor is in charge in Woodbury, and that even somebody as strong-willed, as tough as Merle is willing to back down and to kind of go along with what the governor has to say. And so that just kind of plays to his strength of character in this environment. So I just really thought that was interesting. And the fact that he has impeccable aim with the golf ball, because even he can hit a zombie in the head from 100 yards of the drive. I was like, man, they can't miss with guns, with bows, with crossbows, with bricks. Probably somebody at a bowling ball, they'd be able to hit one in the head. And here we go with a golf ball at 100 yards and smack one in the head. So.
Yeah.
This brings up the interesting point that we had in that email. Is Merle afraid of the governor? I mean, obviously Merle owes the governor his life. He's loyal to the governor. But is he afraid of him? I mean, Merle, up to this point, has been kind of portrayed as this kind of like menacing, crazy badass, and to see that he's brought like humbled in the presence of the governor. I mean, do you guys think he's actually afraid of him?
I would say he's cautious around him, and I would also say it was interesting in the scene. We got to see that it's not just that the governor is trying to dissuade him from going to look and completely succeeding. Merle is not happy with what the governor is saying, and you can definitely tell there's some tension there, which I think is a very interesting development.
Yeah, I don't think he's afraid of him, but I think Merle realizes how good he has it. And as much as he wants to go after his brother, there's still, I think, something in the back of Merle's head that is maybe afraid of what he's going to find. It is his brother, but he kind of, obviously if he's still with the group and based on what Andrea was saying he was, what's he going to find when he comes across him? And maybe it was kind of one of those things where he'll push it, but if he gets pushed back, he's okay to kind of back down, and at least from his perspective, or his conscience is cleared because he's willing to kind of go after him. So it was very, I think it was a complex, I think there's a lot of things going on, and I think we'll see how that relationship furthers as the season goes by.
So then we have another scene in Woodbury where the governor and Andrea sit down and they share a drink before she's about to leave. And we get his quote-unquote real name, Philip, which readers of Rise of the Governor will know to be, I'll say important, noteworthy, certainly worth taking note of. But he finally tells her his name. He says he's Philip. He says he has a wife and daughter, but his wife died in a car accident. I think he said 18 months before the zombies rose up, but before the zombie apocalypse anyway. And he interestingly uses the phrase, now it's just me and my daughter. We have not seen the daughter yet, except in a photograph, if we are to assume that is the same girl. But we have not seen head nor hair of her yet.
Hopefully she's not in the fish tank.
Oh, jeez. Hopefully not. But the governor says, I understand if you're going to leave, but you can return to Woodbury at any time if you change your mind. And Andrea leaves, and we get this kind of weird scene where it almost looks like he's going to kiss her. He's definitely been hitting on her, but she ducks out, and she goes to Michonne and says she's going to stay in Woodbury a little longer, and Michonne storms out.
One of the things, just to back up a little bit, when they're having their drink at the table, I think it's Andrea that says "Today's gone by," and then the governor kind of toast it, which I thought was interesting because again, that was the first episode of the first season was called "Days Gone By." The first volume of the trade is "Days Gone By," so I thought that was interesting that they kind of mentioned that again, or that made it to script.
And if you're paying close attention, you can see the governor look right at the camera and mouth the word "callback." No, that didn't actually happen, but it would have been funny. So then we head back to the prison, and Glenn finds out that someone cut the gate open, so already they can tell there's some sabotage. Axel and Oscar show up, and Rick starts to say, hey, it was these guys, but then, pretty much proving their innocence, which I thought was really good timing, but it worked very well for the plot of the episode. The prison alarm starts going off. It's really loud, more walkers are coming in, you can see them approaching from the distance, and so it's pretty clearly not Axel or Oscar since they're right there. You can't be in two places at once. And they explain where the generators are, and that someone must have just powered them up, and that they think they can go help and shut them off. So Rick and Glenn start shooting out the speakers to bring the sound levels down some, and they go inside the prison to find the generators.
Glenn gets a really cool zombie kill in this scene too. He takes off like the top half of the head of a zombie, and it just kind of flies up in the opposite direction.
I thought it was a cool kill, but the CG was a little dodgy.
I guess I'm looking at low def, so it looked fine to me. Did anybody get a real Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope vibe off of them shooting out the speakers?
Boring conversation anyway.
Yeah, it just had that very detention level feel to it when they started blasting all the cameras around there. Yeah.
So they go into the prison hallways, and we catch up with Carol, who it's just her and T-Dog in this section of the prison, and she decides she's going to do whatever's necessary to help him, but he insists he's going to get her back to the cell block, and then he's going to leave her because he's now a danger to her, being that he's bit. So they reach the laundry room, but they're blocked by walkers. They're out of ammo, and T-Dog charges the walkers, and he tells Carol keep going. She runs for the door, and she looks back. We see T-Dog start to get really torn apart. He gets a chunk taken out of his neck, out of his arm, and she runs towards one of the doors that opens, and we just kind of see her disappear into white light. We don't really see what happens to her after that. So T-Dog gets to go out like a champ. I mean, it sucks he hasn't had more to do in the show, that he hasn't had more lines, but I think we all liked him. We definitely all like Irony Singleton. He's an awesome guy, and at least he got to go out saving somebody else, and just still being pretty awesome, even to his last minute.
Yeah, it was just a shame. I mean, I kind of saw it coming, like I said earlier, but we've interviewed Irony Singleton a couple times, so I guess I feel like we have a little bit more of a connection to him than maybe some folks do. Just a super nice guy. I saw him on The Talking Dead. He was super gracious to Gale and Hurd, to the cast, to the crew. There were a couple times it looked like he was kind of tearing up a little bit as all the well wishes came in and everything. So I guess he's got a couple things career-wise lined up.
Yeah, he's talking about he's got another show filming, which I'm surprised I hadn't heard, because normally that's like the big spoilers. You hear that, hey, this actor's been cast in another show, and you're like, well, I guess they're dying. But I was not spoiled on that one, so that was nice.
Yeah, so good luck to Irony Singleton. I hope we see him and stuff moving forward. And like Gale and Hurd said, you never know. There might be some flashback scene at some point. He may be back. They may decide to tell and give us an episode of how they all got together, originally or something. We've seen them do it before. I think in season 2 we got the flashback to early events in season, prior to the beginning of season 1. So it may not be the last we see of Arnie Singleton in The Walking Dead.
I vote Force Ghost.
So wish his character got more of his due. You know what I mean? After the end of season 2, where he's kind of taking him and Daryl are kind of like the second in command under Rick. I was really hoping that they'd give T-Dog more to do, more lines, and more more motivations, and more for irony to do as an actor. And I never really thought he got his due. So I'm sorry to see him go.
Absolutely. So then we head to a different section of the prison where Lori, Carl, and Maggie are looking for a safe place to go. And Lori starts having contractions. The baby's coming. So they go to the boiler room, and Maggie starts to help Lori deliver the baby. But things quickly go pretty bad. We see that she's starting to hemorrhage blood. It's not looking good. And she knows there's pretty much at this point nothing that can be done for her. So she has a nice conversation with Carl where she tells him she loves him. He's so strong. He's so brave, etc. And she tells Maggie, you're going to have to do a C-section. Take Carl's knife. You're going to have to do it. I'm going to die, but at least give this baby a chance to live. And pretty much in that moment, as soon as she gets cut into, which is pretty graphic, she passes out, and she doesn't say another word after that. And the baby is born. At first, it doesn't seem to be breathing, but Maggie, knows at least enough of what to do to get the baby breathing, and it starts crying, which is a good sign. And I wasn't totally. I want to see what you guys think of this. I wasn't totally on board with Lori's death scene. I mean, I wasn't like hating it. It wasn't terrible, but I wasn't totally on board until the moment when Carl says, she's my mom. I have to be the one who kills her. And we have this flashback to the end of season 2, towards the end of season 2, when Rick and Carl are up in the top of the barn at Herschel's place, and he has that scene where he gives Carl the gun, the same gun that Carl ends up shooting Lori with, and says, things are going to be bad. I'm going to die. Your mom's going to die. You're going to have to do terrible things, etc. And for me, that flashback really sold the scene. Like, I wasn't totally sold until that happened, and then I was, I would have been on my feet applauding if it hadn't been so late at night and people were sleeping. But I've also read some reviews where people thought it took him out of the scene in general. So for me, it's what made it work. For other people, it totally stopped it from working for them. What did you guys feel about the use of the flashback in the scene and the scene in general?
I liked it. I thought it worked well within the context of the scene. It didn't take me out of it at all. Something my wife brought up was that she didn't think that would be an automatic death sentence for her to have a C-section if they were able to stop the bleeding. But I guess for dramatic effect, it had to be. Even as much as I dislike the character of Lori, this is not what I expected to see, or not how I expected to see her go.
I think it's important to note that she was not only bleeding from the C-section, she was hemorrhaging internally. And I mean, aside from Herschel, who they're separated from, even with him around, I don't know in those particular circumstances how fatal that is, but I would assume it's not good.
It's, very
It's obviously not good.
Well, yeah. Complications during pregnancy like that, those are really dangerous, especially if you don't have access to modern medical equipment.
Even with modern medicine, that kind of a situation can be very, very dangerous and extremely life-threatening. So, obviously that's why they wrote it that way. But for me, well, two things. I'll frame it this way. So this whole scene for me was, I knew it was coming. I didn't read any spoilers online. I didn't, hear anything. But I didn't, at least AMC broadcast The Walking Dead at the first time at 9, 8 Central. And then they rebroadcast it at 10 Eastern, 9 Central. So I DVR'd it at 9 o'clock because something else was going on at 8 o'clock. So I waited until like 9:15ish to start it so that way I could catch up and not have to watch all the commercials. So I started over on the DVR. Well, AMC, two things. One, the DVR typically picks up about a minute before the actual hour hits. And sometimes these episodes go over a couple minutes. So when I hit start over, it was actually the scene which we'll get to next, where Maggie brings the baby out and Rick is showing, and I was like, what the hell's going on? I thought that they were starting at the end and they were going to fill it in. And then about 30 seconds later, I was like, son of a gun. And
that
so
sucks,
then
man.
So then I forwarded it and realized what happened. So I had to watch the entire episode knowing exactly how it was going to end. That being said, this was I explained to my wife, I said, that was a very hard scene to watch. It was very, and not just for the gore, but emotionally. I personally felt it was a very heart-wrenching, a very touching, just a very difficult scene to watch, like I said. And I don't know if it's just imagining your own kid in that situation, imagining your wife in that situation, the helplessness of it all. It was not what I expected at all. I mean, we've seen other moments, with Andrea and Amy, and, the way Herschel went out, or not Herschel, the way Dale went out, and other things that have happened in the show. But to me, I got to give it up to Sarah Wayne Callies and just her performance in that role. I mean, maybe it was a little forced in that, it just so happens that she's hemorrhaging internally and that she has this baby this way, and, just so happens that, they're in this situation. But regardless, I mean, again, that's the suspension of disbelief. That's the comic book side of things, the way, these things happen. But, just the whole, when she kept saying, my baby boy, and you're so good, and, you've got to survive in this world, you're going to make it, take care of your, the whole take care of your brother or sister. It's like, even in the end, she didn't know, is it a boy, is it a girl, all these things going on, and take care of your dad. And then I agree with you, Jordan, the flashback sequence to last season with those little bits, I thought that just was really like the topper. To me, I mean, I was kind of getting a little emotional there for a minute. And I'm normally like, Mr. Cold-hearted, SOB. When I watch stuff like this, things like that don't usually affect me at all. But I just from the writing to the acting, to Chandler Riggs and his performance and the way they handled that, especially when he walked away, after they show that scene where he obviously fired the shot and walks past Maggie and he just has that look on his face, and the way they frame that shot, I was just like blown away. I don't know, I can't say enough about it, honestly.
I think the scene is so brutal because, I mean, we see nameless zombies hacked and smashed and burned and destroyed in all these different ways, but then we see a character like Lori, who, we've had mixed feelings about from her actions all the way through this, turn out, like you said, Russ, in a really bravura performance. I really thought that scene worked a lot, and the flashback worked well, I thought, within the context of the scene, to kind of, place the context of where Carl's head is, at that point. And like you said, Russ, Chandler Riggs, really, I mean, for an actor of his age, really showed a lot of range in that one scene.
Yeah, in many ways, this episode and that scene in particular was the final nail in the coffin of his childhood and his humanity. If we thought there was any of that left, there was even another little glances shared between him and Beth earlier in the episode. I'm curious now to see who does he become after this, because I mean, we'll get to it in a minute. I want to talk some other things before we talk about the end scene, but just how cold he looks and how almost dead inside he looks, and not in he's just not acting, but he really is acting, and just acting really cold. What does this mean for Carl and Rick and the baby? It's going to be very interesting as we move forward.
But and two, before he had to do that, and before she actually passed, he had kind of his his moment. He was like a kid. He was crying, and he could grab hold of her, and he was hugging her, and
Yells, Meg, you're killing her.
Yeah. So I mean, he was definitely, again, it's just, we kind of saw it, a couple episodes ago, like I said, when they hit the prison, and he kind of got scolded in front of Beth, and he kind of acted like a kid and ran off. I wonder if this is the last we're going to see of that side of Carl, where he's, that was his last moment to act like a kid and to be affected like a kid who lost his mother, at such a young age. But it's just, man, it just had me all twisted up. Like I didn't know which, it's so funny because I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming, but I guess I didn't, I couldn't have imagined that it would have happened that way, and that the performance would have carried forward the way it did, and that just really just knocked me on my butt.
Right. We talked a bit about this 2 weeks ago and the week before that with the episodes 1 and 2 of season 3. They were doing Laurie rehab, if you will. They're doing a lot of rehab on the character, making her more sympathetic, making her realize the mistakes she's made, etc. I feel they did enough to really earn that scene. Do you guys agree? Do you feel differently? Do you think they should have done more for her character, or do you think they could just write them out in terms of bringing her back to a point where we can feel bad for her as she's on death's door there?
I think they did enough. I mean, would it have been okay for them to do more? I think, sure. But again, the other powerful thing to this, and I think we'll get to this not only in a few minutes here, but for episodes to come, is Rick never got to reconcile with her.
Yeah.
They never worked it out. They never got to the bottom of how they were going to handle things, or if they still loved each other. And Rick in some ways is responsible for what happened. He didn't make sure that was Andrew. Was that his name?
Andrew, yes.
Yeah, that he was dead. He assumed, because he put him on a locked yard with a crap load of zombies, that he wasn't going to make it.
And we all assume the same thing.
Exactly. But ultimately, again, a little moment of weakness on Rick's part. And this is what it cost him. And he wasn't there to protect his wife and his son. And again, goes back to Shane, right? What was Shane's whole deal? You can't protect them. I can keep her safe. I can keep Carl safe. And, just by strange twist of fate and the way things happen, Rick couldn't protect his wife. And, I mean, it's just, I think that makes it more powerful than if they would have spent the time, redeeming her character fully, her and Rick reconciling, or not reconciling and being fine with it or whatever. I think this scene wouldn't have the impact that it does to both the audience and the characters.
Yeah, I agree. The potential is more tragic than if they'd spelled it out. I think it's more like you said. The potential that was there for them to reconcile. The fact they never got to is more tragic than if they had actually reconciled and then Laurie had died. So I think it works.
Yeah. So, speaking of Rick, we catch up with Rick, Oscar, and Daryl as they are heading to the generator room, and they find when they get there, they start to try to turn things off. One, Andrew comes out of the shadows with an axe and attacks Rick, and it kind of reminds me in some ways of the first Transporter movie or Old Boy or something. Certainly not in the scope of those particular fights, but just him versus Rick with the axe. Rick's going for his gun. The gun gets knocked out of his hand. They get punched around a little bit, and finally they both stand up and they're looking at each other. And Oscar picks up the gun, and Andrew's telling him, "Shoot Rick, shoot him. We can take this place back." And Rick's looking at him, and Rick is really not sure what's going to happen. But Oscar points the gun to the left, hits Andrew, and even at that point, I think Rick kind of thinks that he's going to get shot too. But Oscar gives him the gun. They power down the generator, and that crisis in particular is averted.
Yeah, this to me, I guess, a little telegraphed. I mean, I kind of saw the way that this was going to go. But cool sequence nonetheless. I mean, the two of them kind of squaring off, and again, the brutality and the kind of close quarters combat and everything.
And it allows Oscar a way into the group. It allows Rick to have a reason to trust him, which I think is good. Because I could see if this was season 2, Oscar and Axel outside the prison, almost like a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern type group, where they're there making snarky comments or something, and Rick won't let them in, and it goes on for episode after episode. And here, they're not taking that long route. I think by next episode, either they will be in the group or they will be making their way into the group, which I think is good.
Yeah, agreed.
So then we get to the scene that we've alluded to a few times in the episode, and that's it's a killer. It's when they get back, everybody kind of comes back to the courtyard. They cleared out the zombies from there, at least enough that they can have a conversation. And at first, I guess it's just Rick, Daryl, and Glenn, and Oscar and Axel. They meet back up with Ben, or with Herschel and Beth, and then they're looking for T-Dog, they're looking for Carol, they're looking for Laurie and Maggie and Carl, and they know that T-Dog is dead. I think they find his body. They assume Carol's dead. We never see that in the episode, and there's an interesting theory someone posted on the Facebook group we'll discuss later about that. And then Maggie and Carl emerge from one of the rooms from the prison, carrying the baby, and it takes Rick a second to fully vocalize what he's realizing, but I don't even know if he says anything. He just starts kind of screaming, wailing, crying, no, as he can't even touch the baby or look at the baby. He kind of just looks more at Carl and understands what Carl did and had to do, and he just keeps screaming. It's this really emotional scene, and he collapses on the ground, and that's how we end the episode. I mean, as much as I thought the Laurie death scene was affecting it, and especially once the flashback hit, this is the part that broke me. I mean, it was just some stellar work from Andrew Lincoln. That was a killer scene.
And again, Chandler Ring's reaction to him.
Or lack of reaction.
Exactly. Like, again, such a subtle performance for such a young guy, just really well done, well acted. And again, like you said with the Andrew Lincoln, the wailing, that just kind of, that mournful wail is just really, again, well executed. Again, another reason why we'll see in the Buster ratings later why, I think this might be a lot of people's favorite episodes so far.
The other performance that, definitely we don't want to go underrated was Lauren Cohan. And there's a lot of times in movies, TV shows, whatever, where something emotional happens and the characters are supposed to be crying, and a lot of times you feel like they get the facial expressions and the sobbing and everything, but man, I just really bought that she was bawling her eyes out and was just so absolutely distraught with what happened and what had to happen. And when Rick went to go, he wanted to go after Laurie. He didn't. I thought maybe at that moment he thought maybe just there's a 0.1% chance that she's just trapped somewhere and he was going to go after her. And Maggie grabs him and says, "No, Rick, don't, and she's just just crying and has this baby held against her, covered in her hands and the baby are in blood and everything going on. And I just again, and then you combine that with Andrew Lincoln's performance and the collapse at the end and just his overflowing of emotion. It just was incredible. I mean, it just it's funny because Andrew Lincoln, I've heard him on Chris Hardwick's Nerdist, and I've heard him interviewed somewhere else. Maybe it was one of the panel. It was the New York Comic Con panel, and he joked that don't ever say how much can they do to Rick to break him, to break his character, because you'll find out. And now we know at least one phase of what that means, and it'll be interesting to see what's to come. But yeah, I mean, just the performances in this episode were just just unbelievable all the way around. I mean, even with Daryl when they said something about, Daryl says, well, that could have been anybody, that could have been me, holed up in this prison, or anybody, any of my family or anybody I knew. And so, at that point, T-Dog says, well, or somebody says, well, should we, you're agreeing with me, then we should, let him in with us. And he's like, hell no, we shouldn't do, it's like, his delivery on that I thought was really good. And just, the way he responded when he picked up that scarf and knew it was Carol's, he definitely had a reaction there. So again, the performances in this episode were just top notch. If nobody is not at least nominated for an Emmy for this season, at least so far, then I think there's, or the show itself and doesn't win something, I think, on the dramatic side, I think there's something wrong.
It's interesting to me that this is episode 4 of a 16-episode season. This isn't a season finale. Yeah. This isn't a mid-season finale. Where do they go from here? I mean, I know we have the inevitable, and this is not a spoiler, the inevitable meeting of Rick and the governor of good old Phil. We obviously are going to build to that at some point, presumably this season. I don't see them really stretching out to season 4. But aside from that, I mean, they've pretty much said this train keeps moving, and it keeps moving in ways you're not going to expect. But I have no idea what to expect. Where do you go from an episode like this that keeps that momentum going and doesn't turn into the slower parts of season 2?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I will say this, overall, there's been a lot of character deaths. There's been a lot of crazy, dramatic, over-the-top, physical character moments so far this season. And I think I'm at the point where if they keep on this path, A, there's not going to be any primary cast left, but B, it just becomes you're waiting every episode for somebody to be killed off or somebody to die or something horrible happen to somebody. I think we need to stretch for a while where they either use that to build more tension or to find some other outlet to give us some action. But I think if they need to just kind of chill out for a little while on like major character deaths, because like I said, then to me it just seems like you're pandering, and it's almost like you're just trying to be shocking and you're trying to be edgy. And I think the show proved that it can be more than that. And I think there's a lot of things they can do with these characters in their current state of mind and what they've been through recently that they can do some really cool stuff.
And if I had to guess, I would assume that over the next few episodes it'll be more cerebral and psychological with Rick's group, and the action will be relegated to the governor's crew as they go out on missions and we're also looking for Daryl, etc. But I think that would be probably the best way in terms of being efficient with the characters and allowing them to breathe and to mourn the loss of of Lori and T-Dog and possibly Carol. That's probably the way I would do it. But who knows? The way they've been doing this this season, I wouldn't place any bets on anything because they're doing what they're doing, and I'm loving every minute of it.
I agree, and I know the way it plays out in the comic, and I'm wondering how close it's going to be in the television show. I mean, we've seen some of the other deviations from the plotline of the comic and how things have played out and how characters have been reshuffled. It'll be interesting to see how close in Recreation it is to the source material. How long is the break between the end of season 8 and the premiere of season 9 in the season?
Or episode 8 and episode 9? I think it's
episode 8.
I think it's about 2 months, just like last year. Like you stop around Thanksgiving and then you come back mid-January, but I'm not 100% sure.
After the Super Bowl, I guess after football season, I'm trying to
February
think.
sweeps.
It looks like there's only, I think the break, unless I'm mistaken, but looking at I think what John's put on the calendar,
I think that's
there's only
right?
There's 6. There's only 2 more before the break.
Oh wow, so we're gonna have a lot next year.
Yeah, so we get, and that's like I said, if this is correct, so we'll get episode 5 next week on the 11th, and then we'll get episode 6 on the 18th, and then it says that we go on hiatus. So it looks like they're gonna split it up between 6 and then 10. So.
Well, that'll give us some breathing room for sure. I wonder if we do another time jump, but I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I think at the end of this episode, I'll warn everybody now, after the ending, after the bloopers, we're going to have a small spoiler discussion about what happened in the comics versus what happened in the show. So if you are interested in that and don't mind the spoilers, stick around. But before we get to that, Russ, I think Brad sent in an email with his thoughts on the episode.
He did. Like I said, since he thought it was more important to go see Primus, I'm going to continue to razz him for that. But this will be good to lead us into our Buster ratings because Brad's email ends with his. Here's some of what Mr. Milo had to say. I think the lesson to be taken away from this episode is to not believe anything anybody associated with the show ever says about the show. We were told that T-Dog would have a bigger story this season, and we all saw how that turned out to be a lie. I expected T-Dog to play a major part in the season story. My expectations for the show are completely out the window now, and that's okay with me. As sad as it was to see T-Dog out in this episode, I approve of the way he went out. Brave and selfless. Good night, T-Dog. Gonna miss you. Lori's death was unexpected and selfless as well. The only difference is I won't really miss her. I've decided that the Andrea we know and love from the comics will never be in the show. I will miss seeing her. Carl's acting in this episode improved tenfold. The moment when Rick realized what happened to Lori and what part Carl played in it was very powerful and moved me to tears. Bravo to Chandler Riggs and to Andrew Lincoln for an incredibly well done scene. I'm sure we ain't seen nothing yet. 4 5/8 busters for Mr. Brad Milo.
Well, a lot of our Facebook friends had a lot of really great things to say about this episode. Most of them gave it 5 busters. Everard gives it a 5 out of 5. I'll go ahead and give my very first 5 out of 5. He says it wasn't perfect, but it really had a lot of everything that makes the series great. Mike Jones says if it's possible to exceed 5, then this is it. Too soon for irony. He never got his just desserts. Echo Alpha gives it 5 out of 5. Elisa Gonzalez gives it a 5. Also thinks they should name the baby girl T-Dog. I think it's a great idea. Robert Nigro, 5.5 out of 5. Amy Jade Sun, despite she's very unhappy that the writers chose to kill T-Dog without spending any quality time on developing him further, still gives it 5 busters. So it's pretty much, I mean, we have like a 4.75 from Terry, and Mary gives it 5 teary-eyed busters. So it's pretty unanimous. Most everyone here is giving it between 4.5 and 5. A lot of positive feedback on this episode. Mary Collins had the 2-word comment, Chandler Riggs. And I agree with that. That's great. Oh, and Luke Smith, our good friend at Luke Smith FX, also 5 busters. Best, most shocking episode to date.
What about you two? What do you give it for Buster ratings?
I give it a 5. Again, when a television show can elicit that kind of emotional response in somebody and can get you that invested and that kind of twisted up about what's going on to a bunch of fictional characters, I think that's worthy of note, and I think that's something that obviously says that it was good, it was powerful. Like I said, the performances were second to none. I mean, I think from a start to finish, even though I give it, like I said, the performances are what pushed this over the top as a 5. The actual events that took place, were good and were on par with some of the better episodes we've seen. But again, the acting in this one and the writing and the way they handled Lori's death specifically they just knocked it out of the park completely.
I too give it a 5 out of 5. This is one of my favorite episodes of the entire series. Just really well done, well directed, well paced. Breaking up the nonstop action of the prison with the Woodbury segments was a really great device in this episode. Even in the quieter scenes, the scene like we were talking about between Merle and the governor, and the scene between Andrea and Michonne. I mean, the scene with Andrea and the governor when they have a drink or whatever. Those are still intense. Even though it's not zombies chasing me down a skewed camera in a dark hallway, intense. They still had a very a lot of gravitas to it. The acting is top notch all across the board. Like we're saying, Andrew Lincoln, Chandler Riggs, great jobs in this episode. So I give it a 5 out of 5. I love this episode.
I wrestled quite a bit with what I was going to rate this one, but I think in the end, especially after discussing with you guys, I think I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 as well. And I think for this show, this is the best it can be, and I'm really happy with that. So 5 out of 5 busters for me.
I want to say really quickly about this episode that one of the prides of my home city, Pittsburgh, was a featured zombie in this episode, and that would be Mr. Hines Ward.
That's right.
Legendary wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
He could outrun a bomb in Dark Knight Rises, but apparently not a zombie in The Walking Dead.
I guess some makeup's really heavy or something. I don't know. Plus, he won at Dancing with the Stars, so he's like the only guy to have those 3 IMDb credits on one page, I think. But I just wanted to shout him out. Hines Ward, classy guy, Pittsburgh legend, and now zombie. Pretty cool.
Russ, I believe our good friend Aaron North from the Out Now There and podcast sent in his thoughts as well. Why don't you read that email?
Alrighty. So one of the other things to keep in mind is to check out hhwlod.com. Aaron Neworth, who hosts the Out Now podcast with Aaron and Abe on the HHWLD podcast network, he does tons of movie reviews. He's also started weekly doing formal reviews of each episode of The Walking Dead that are getting posted up on the front page of the website. So you can check it out here. But he did send us an email for this week's episode. He says, the title already indicated that this wouldn't be a subtle episode, but let me start out by giving an on-air high five to Johnny M as he caught Lori's death early on. Now he's just gunning for that baby. Wow. So I figured you guys...
There's one thing we know for sure. Johnny M hates babies.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it's going to have to be an unanswered high five because Johnny's not here tonight. So.
Yeah, so we can make fun of him and he can't rebut.
What is with that accent? I mean, seriously, there's no way that's real.
Ouch.
We love you, John. Not the mullet, but we love you.
Oh, call back. All right, so I figure you guys have already pointed out the good about this episode, as I do find it to be well acted, tense and exciting, along with shocking to an extent. I was not even bothered by choices made by characters, despite the arrival of a ton of walkers, which went unnoticed until it was too late. The reason I'm not head over heels in this episode, despite the fact that I don't think it is a very solid one, is in regards to the 2 deaths for different reasons. With T-Dog, sure it's sad and he went out a hero, but other than being around since season 1, nothing significant was ever given to us about him, besides some broad strokes and a Dale moment before his end, which we kind of talked about. As he argued for keeping the prisoners around. With respect to Irony Singleton, he just leaves the show as that helpful fellow who didn't have the riot shield when he really needed it. Yeah, I think we mentioned that as well. This might have bothered me less if we didn't also have Lori's death, which also makes T-Dog's death inconsequential. Now, I'm all for shock and surprise, and yes, season 3 is certainly taking prisoners, in a prison no less, in terms of its attitude, but I feel like we should be easing back on the throttle. I don't need the pace of the series to slow to a crawl, but focusing on the human drama in the face of a zombie apocalypse is what The Walking Dead is about, as opposed to a weekly routine of everyone being chased by walkers and suffering some consequences. I'm glad that the show is taking risks, and I'm not sure things will slow down now, so everyone has some time to explore the new group dynamic, but still, let's ease it back. Woodbury stuff was fine, just more the same, but I'm enjoying what Merle's bringing to the table. 4 out of 5 busters. And he has a few notes here. Note, anyone who thinks Carol died is silly. Note number 2, did Carl actually shoot Lori? Just a thought. And note number 3, I hope the governor has an English caddy that can say, nice shot, governor.
Oh, please. Interesting note by Aaron there, the one about, do you think Carl actually shot Lori? This is not a spoiler, we have no idea, but David G on the Facebook group put an interesting comment where he says maybe Carl could not shoot his mom, and Carol finds her while still running and manages somehow to save her. I don't expect that to happen, but I think it would be an interesting twist.
No, I think it would kind of invalidate the whole emotional impact at the end of the last episode then. If it turned out Lori wasn't actually dead. I'd say it being like a cheat.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm with Jim. I think that would be I think everybody would just have a real big groan moment if that was the case. I do think he shot her in the head. I think that's the place Carl is at. We've seen it. He's become hard-edged. He knows what has to be done. They made a point again with the flashback, so I don't see that being the case.
Like I said, I don't expect it to happen, but I thought it was an interesting idea. Russ, I believe we have a voicemail about this week's episode. Why don't you play that for us?
Hello, this is Dane Brandon. I'm Dane Brandon on the forum, and I just watched the episode. I have one thing to say. Lori Grimes, mother of the year. Thanks. Look forward to your next episode. Bye.
Thank you, Dane.
You got me, dude.
Burn, Jim.
I have been summarily burned.
Short and sweet.
And Jim, I think you also have one last email for us this episode.
I do. It's from Angel, and she wanted to say about David Morrissey, the guy who's playing the governor, that he betrayed the father of a very dysfunctional family on the short-lived television show Meadowlands, which she really liked. It was basically about a town that was populated by people who were in some sort of witness protection program before once she could recall all the people had shady pasts. It was a great show, but much like Twin Peaks or Dead Like Me, the world was not ready for that type of TV show, even on premium TV. Keep up the good work, Angel.
Thank you very much, Angel. So I think that's going to be it for the discussion of the episode. Like I said, we're going to do our outro, bloopers, all that kind of stuff, and then at the very end, we'll have a spoiler section where we're going to discuss a little bit about the differences between Lori's death in the TV show and where her character is or has been in the comic book. So if you are interested in that, just stick around after the ending. But until next episode, you can check out all of our great shows at hhwlod.com or walkingdeadtv.com. You can also find all of our contact information there, and we'd love to get a voicemail or an email for you because we love our fans. And don't forget to check out the Facebook group as well. And so until there's no more room left in hell and the dead walk the earth, remember, R.I.P. T-Dog. Have a good week, everybody. And next week on The Walking Dead, this is mild spoilers, only nice synopsis as usual. The episode 305 is titled Say the Word, and the synopsis we have is, after another loss, Rick struggles. Michonne remains suspicious of the governor as he throws a party with a unique twist for the people of Woodbury. So that should be interesting. All right, on to the end. Have a good week, everybody.
So long.
Mother, there is no other. Like mother, to treat her right. Mother, I always love her. My mother, to treat her right, treat her right.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 75 of the Walking Dead TV podcast, where we'll be discussing episode 3 or 4. Rough start.
3 or 4?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Pick. It's choose your own podcast.
If you think Russ should lead the show, jump ahead to 3203. If you think Jim should lead the show, jump to 1972.
Wait, that should be me since that was the year I was born. So
I was using timestamps, not years, but
whatever.
So this has become a Choose Your Own Adventure podcast?
Choose Your Own Adventure podcast. We're going to make billions of nothing. Russ, I believe we have a voicemail about this week's episode. Why don't you play that for us?
We do, and like a moron, I dismantled my tablet. So
Dismantled it?
Well, not dismantled. I took it all apart. I unscrewed it, took the screen off. I just want to see how the thing ticks.
How bored were you this episode?
Mother, can you keep them in the dark for life? Can you hide them from the waiting world? Mother, Father.
Alrighty, so spoiler warning again. We're going to try to keep things limited to a smaller scope involving Laurie and a few things coming up with the prison. But, so spoiler alert, this is your last chance. There's nothing in this episode after this, just spoilers, so if you don't want to hear them, turn it off now. But for those of you who are going to stick around, Laurie's death in the comics versus Laurie's death in the show, quite different. We also had an interesting note Russ wanted to talk about how things are a little less even in terms of the prison population in the show than they were in the comics. So, Russ, why don't you raise point one?
Yeah, one of the things that I want to talk about, I almost blew this a couple times in the regular show, and then I was like, I had to really work hard to catch myself because I don't want to spoil it for anybody that is either in the middle of reading the comics, wants to read the comics, or just doesn't want to be spoiled in case one day they may want to read the comics. And I won't go into the specifics of exactly how Laurie dies, but in the comic, Laurie's death is pretty sudden, unexpected, tragic, and it wasn't just her; it was her and the baby. Both died at the same time in a very violent fashion. And that was the first time. It's funny because the reaction I had when I read that in the comic, and I'd be curious what your guys' reaction was when you read that sequence. But it wasn't. I didn't have an emotional reaction. I had a, oh my god, I can't believe they did this in a comic book. I can't believe they went there. That was like the shock of them going to that point. Just overwhelmed me from I've never seen that in a comic before. I've never seen anything like that happen. And so that's the reaction I had with the comic. And then you look at what happened in the show, and the way they handled her death in the show is maybe you had more time to. It didn't happen suddenly. I mean, you had more time to kind of understand what was going on, what the consequence was. You had multiple actors' performances that were kind of in it. There was a lot of sacrifice to it. And I really appreciate in the TV show the way that was handled. And I think that's the way that things can work differently and better in the TV medium than they do in the comic. In the comic, you can kind of pull off that shock thing. In the TV show, I think it would have just been so violent, so sudden that you wouldn't really have time to process it. And it's, again, we've seen it with other things that have happened in the show where they may end up at the same point in the end, but the journey on how they got there is very different. And it just really impressed me that Kirkman decided to take this approach and to really kind of punch the viewer in the heart while watching this death sequence take place in the show. And it's so different than what happens in the comic that it just really stuck with me.
And yet it's brutal and it's shocking, almost as much so as in the comic in its own way in the show. You know what I mean? It's a different way. Yeah. It's a different way and a different occurrence. Of how it goes down. But I mean, gutting Laurie like that on the cement floor to pry her baby out of her stomach with no anesthetic and while she's bleeding out, and hemorrhaging, that's pretty shocking too. It's just shocking and brutal in a totally different way. And I'm interested to see where the storyline is going to go now that it's diverged in yet another way from the canon of the comic.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting twist in that. I mean, I've seen a lot of people online on our Facebook group and other places as well, but saying, oh, so much more brutal or shocking in the comic. And while in some ways that's true, this was just brutal in a different way. I mean, in the comic, it's a very violent death. In the show, as we've all seen now, it's not a pleasant death, but it's a somewhat complicit death. It's a somewhat a sacrificial death. I mean, she understands what she's getting into, and like you said, Russ, this is that emotional response as opposed to the shocking. Very different deaths. But I don't know that I would say one was better or worse. They're just very different.
Well, the tragedy of the death in the comic is that not only the mother but the child dies.
Right.
And I mean, as opposed to here where there's like a glimmer of hope that this child could live.
Which would make the show very different than the comic was.
Exactly.
Our other big point that Russ wanted to talk about, I guess I'll set this one up, is the prison population in the show is how many people now? About 7, 8 maybe? Very small. In the comics, I want to say it was at least twice that around this point. And why that becomes important is, like we've already said, I mean, it's obligatory, it's inevitable that at some point the governor and Woodbury will interact with Rick and his group. In the comics, those numbers are a little bit more even. In the show, at least as of this point, they are very uneven odds, very uneven numbers. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, whether it'll be similar, completely different, or whether there'll be an influx of new characters over the next few weeks. I'm definitely interested to see how they play the differences in the numbers to their advantage.
Yeah, it makes me think that here we are in season 3. The stuff that we're talking about in the comics happens like ostensibly what would be like the end of season 8 to some degree for some aspects of it, and other things it would be kind of the third trade. These events that are happening now, let me put it this way, happen between trades 3 and 8 of the comics, which basically between issues 18 and 48. So it's a pretty wide spread, and we see how things are panning out. But it makes me feel that I think the governor is going to be a longer lasting character. I don't think he's going to be somebody that's, and this is pure speculation at this point, but I don't think he's going to be somebody that we're just going to see in season 3, and then the threat is going to be dispatched, and we'll move on to something else in season 4. I fully expect that the governor is going to last seasons 3 and 4. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Rick's group is much smaller than it is in the comic, and as far as a balancing force goes, one greatly outnumbers the other, and I think it's very interesting. I mean, even we talked about this before. The set of the prison in the show is much smaller than what they're used in the comic. When they were in that cell block, it was what you would typically think of as a cell block, like an Alcatraz or like a large prison where there's a big row of cells, and you could have a conversation on one end and the other end, the other side not see you. And I just find it very interesting that things are more close knit, more claustrophobic, and the cast is much smaller on Rick's side. So the inevitable confrontation to me is going to be extremely interesting to see how that plays out.
I think I'd also like to see him last more than one season, but it is. Yeah. We do have 12 episodes left this season, so it'll be interesting to see. A lot can change in that amount of time. We might be saying a different tune by then in terms of what we want to happen. Who knows?
True, very true.
And also, I think I might have briefly mentioned it during the episode proper, but I think we could have another time jump between episode 6 and episode 7. I have no inside information, I'm just speculating, but we could come back and there could be more characters on Rick's side.
Could be. Could very well be. Maybe because of Chandler Riggs' age, that there's going to come a point in the show where it's going to be like the Walt on Lost syndrome, right? I mean, the kid's going to grow like a foot in the off season and have to start shaving. So at some point, they're probably going to have to jump a little bit just to just to address that fact. But yeah, I just thought it was noteworthy for us with this episode to kind of discuss, especially the Laurie thing in a little more detail, and for me to kind of get it off my chest, I guess. And we definitely didn't want to spoil it for everyone. I know when Shane died in the show, we kind of let the cat out of the bag in the regular episode. When and how it happened in the comic. Without John and Brad being here and just kind of being somewhat spontaneous. And this is a pretty big thing that we've disclosed here in the spoiler area. So I just felt it best that it kind of go at the end and separated, so if somebody doesn't want to hear it, they don't have to hear it. So
Right, and again, we're still being pretty vague because even though, yes, Lori is dead in the comics and she does die in the prison, how that happens is still pretty integral to the overall prison story. And it could happen to a different character, it could happen in a different way, to in some way, but a lot of the stuff that we're skirting around is still very integral to this season. So again, we're keeping it vague. We hope if you did listen and you were kind of iffy on spoilers, we didn't give away too much, but thank you for sticking along with us, and have a good week.
thanks.
Good night.